Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. This week we have the Q7. This is Audi's premium three-row SUV. I use that term premium even though it is thrown around a ton in the automotive world, but today I'm going to show you that this is genuinely a vehicle of quality. Now this car actually shares the same basic platform as things such as the Bentley Bentayga and the Porsche Cayenne. This is the MLB Evo platform, and don't get me wrong, by no means is this either of those two cars, but what this car does benefit from is all the engineering that goes into this platform, which is shared with more expensive cars, is in this vehicle, and it definitely shows in the build quality and things of that nature. A good example of that also is the extensive use of aluminum in this vehicle, which really helps reduce the weight. In its base form, it's under 5,000 pounds, which is pretty impressive for a three-row premium SUV. But we're gonna get all into that. We're gonna take this thing for a ride, but before we do that, let me show you the interior and what makes this thing so nice. Stepping into the Audi Q7, this is not an all new Audi Q7, but it was heavily refreshed. One of the main things that they refreshed was this interior. It is heaps and bounds better and is packed full of technology. It's an experience that's dominated by the screens in here. There's three main screens, one of which is, of course, your center gauge cluster, which would traditionally be dials for your tach and your miles per hour. And it still is those things, except now it's digital. So you can adjust the size of the tach and really everything about the gauge cluster itself you can customize. You can also overlay Google Maps onto the cluster, which is really nice. Even the satellite view of Google Maps, although I don't really like the satellite view because it's a little too busy, especially here in LA. There's just so much stuff going on you can't really see, but the Maps view is amazing, and of course it gives you turn-by-turn directions if you have the navigation going. So that's a really nice touch. Moving to the center screen is, of course, where you're going to spend most of your time dealing with multimedia and putting in your navigation and whatnot. The navigation itself is really cool because when I enter and hit the search button and search for a location, I can actually write in this pad down here on the screen a specific address or whatever, or a contact even, and it will recognize my writing and plug it into the screen, which is actually really awesome considering how well it works. I've terrible chicken scratch, but this system recognizes what I'm writing, which is pretty remarkable. The system also has haptic touch, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, when you press the screen, it gives you a little bit of a vibration and also an audible click. So it's more than just a traditional screen that you touch and the only feedback you get is that the screen changes. You're actually feeling it when you touch it, and it just kind of gives it more of almost a tactile button feel, like a traditional button. You know, you get that satisfying click when you click a button. I think they're going for, once again, a more premium thing. Haptic feedback is nothing unique to Audi. A lot of manufacturers are doing it in more premium vehicles, and it's kind of a cool touch. One of the other things that took me a little while to get used to was the amount of customization that you can do in this vehicle. And you mostly do it with this main screen here. You can adjust all sorts of the driving aids, you know, lane departure, blind spot monitoring. You can adjust the interior lighting. You can adjust the driving modes, how aggressive you want it, how firm you want the suspension. There's just so many settings, and it's really cool that you can tailor that to your own driving needs. Now, what's nice about it is that you can save that into profiles. So if you let somebody borrow your car, put them on a different profile so they don't mess up your profile. That's really nice. It takes a while to get through all those menus and get everything set up, but I don't consider that necessarily a knock on this thing because realistically, you're going to have it for a couple years, and to spend the first week customizing it isn't really the end of the world. And plus, once again, I really like the fact that you can customize it. Moving down to this screen here, this is your mostly HVAC control, although I mentioned that it does use the writing for the navigation up top. But my favorite thing about the HVAC is that you can actually scroll up and down on the temperature instead of pressing the plus or minus button if you want to change the temperature a whole bunch. You know, you'd be sitting there spamming the plus or minus button. So this is pretty cool that you can scroll up and down on the temperature button. The various other things here, you can disable the start stop here, which I don't know why you would do that in a luxury SUV. I leave it on. Heated and cooled seats. These seats are very comfortable. I took it on a long road trip, had no discomfort, very adjustable. And just to speak about the general quality and build quality of this thing, if you start to lean on things, the door card, the center console, armrest, even this, like you try and move the center console or press on it and see if you hear any creaks, there are none. This is an incredibly well-built vehicle, and it really shows when you start to get into the nitty-gritty here. Now, are you going to get in the vehicle and like go like this? No, but it just goes to show that being that this is on the same platform as some very expensive vehicles, a la the Bentley Bentayga, it just kind of trickles down the quality in this vehicle. So let's head to the back, because there's a couple other things I want to show you back there. One thing I'd like to touch on in the back, outside of just having 3 rows, the seats are quite comfortable. The back row is pretty much just for children or small adults or people you really don't like. But what's really cool about the back row is you might think it'd be difficult to put those seats up in the back, but there's buttons in not only the back hatch area, but also in the middle row here that I can just push up, and it will deploy the seats without me having to do anything other than to push this button. So that's a really cool thing. And also just the fact that these all fold completely flat is really nice for hauling things around. Or I actually went on a trip in this thing and went on a little camping trip, put a twin air mattress in the back here. It fit perfectly. It was nice and flat and was actually a nice place to be. So pretty usable SUV back area with all the seats folding completely flat. Time to take the Q7 for a drive and see what it's like on the road. The first thing I noticed when I got in this car is how well it rides. This car has the optional premium package, which is $10,000, an insane amount of money, but it gets you a ton of things. One of which is very important in my book in this car, is the air suspension. The air suspension makes this car ride and float over bumps. LA is not known for having good roads, and despite the fact that these roads are completely broken, this thing just cruises right over them. And it's actually kind of interesting too, because I mentioned earlier I took this thing on a little camping trip. I was on a dirt road briefly. It has an off-road mode, and what's also cool about the suspension, the air suspension, is that you can adjust the height of it. So you can drop it down, you can drop it, you can bring it up when you're going off-roading, or it even has a button in the back to raise and lower the tailgate if you need it to be lower for whatever reason, or you need to be higher for loading things up. It's pretty cool, like, to have air suspension not only be functional to do all these different things, but also just be really, really luxurious and make this car ride just absolutely sublime. It's great for around town or in the highway or any of those things. The suspension is wonderful. There are some things that I don't like, though, when it starts to come to the powertrain. Now, the engine itself is really good. It's a 3-liter V6 turbocharged, and they used to have a 3-liter supercharged version of this car. That was like the older version. Now it's turbocharged, a little more efficient. Doesn't quite have the character of the supercharged version, but I don't think most people buying this car really care about character. They just want it to be efficient, and they probably want it to be quiet, which this is all those things. The fuel economy is supposed to be 21 miles to the gallon highway. I got 26 on the highway, so I think Audi Volkswagen is very much underselling their numbers ever since Dieselgate, but that's for you to decide. I just think that this is actually fairly efficient given its size when you get in the real world. But back to the engine, it is pretty stout in my opinion. Now, you can get the base engine is a 4-cylinder. Would not recommend. I haven't driven it, but I would say this is adequate and maybe slightly above adequate. It can be kind of quick feeling at times. It's by no means a fast vehicle, but it's certainly not slow, this turbo V6. Now, I can imagine the 4-cylinder being very good with, you know, a 5,000-pound SUV, but who knows? If you're looking for the most fuel economy and you don't mind it taking a little longer to get to 0 to 60, maybe the 2 liters for you. But to me, this is a great engine, as long as you're not going for any of the performance versions with the V8. But this engine is efficient and it revs well. It has a ton of torque. What I don't like, though, is this transmission. It's actually a little bit sluggish to respond sometimes, even when I have it in the dynamic and sport driving mode. It's a ZF 8-speed transmission, and these are known for being really good transmissions. So I don't know what Audi did with the programming of this thing, but I don't particularly like it. It's not horrible for, you know, chilling, driving around town. It's really fine, but sometimes I get to be a little bit of an aggressive driver, and when you stab on the gas and expect this thing to react a little bit quicker, it simply doesn't, and that's a little bit of a downfall in my opinion. I think it's very smooth, it's great once again around town, but does suffer a little bit when you really start to push it. When it comes to the overall build quality we talked about before on the interior, it's really further you know, solidified when you take this thing on the road. It is so quiet, even at speed on the highway, going allegedly, you know, 80 plus miles an hour. Of course, I would never speed on the highway, but it's just so quiet. There's no wind noise, there's no road noise. It's such a well-insulated vehicle, and you definitely just feel like you're in a premium SUV. And in fact, I found myself just feeling like I was in this just little capsule of sorts, so insulated from the outside environment between any noise, very little vibrations, even with a gas engine. Of course, you know, electric vehicles are now the best at the noise, vibration, harshness, but man, even this thing is just super premium feeling, really anytime you're driving it. So it's been a lovely experience, and I think that the looks are probably something that is going to be up to you. Of course, anytime looks with a vehicle is subject to beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think it's very subdued. It's classic Audi. All their vehicles kind of look the same. So if you're looking for something that is a little understated, even though it's very premium, this is it. But if you're looking for something that stands out a little bit more and you could brag to your soccer moms and dads about, maybe you look elsewhere if you want something a little bit flashier. Now, that said, this is definitely a vehicle worth bragging about, like when you get in it and you drive it. Despite the fact that it looks very conservative, it's just such a nice premium thing. So decide what you want. Now, do you want something understated? Perfect car for you. It's super luxurious, and no one's gonna really bat an eye, to be honest, because there's a million of these things out there and they look like every other Audi, and that can either be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. A few other things worth mentioning with the Q7 is that the door closes with a thunk. It feels very solid. It also has soft close, so if you get it close, it locks in the door by itself, adding once again to the premium luxuriness of this vehicle. And last, the radar cruise control works extremely well, maintaining a distance between you and the car in front of you. You can adjust the distance that it does maintain, and it'll even come to a stop if the car in front of you comes to a stop, and it will go when the car in front of you goes. So it's nice to have in traffic. Summing up the Q7, I think that this is actually a pretty decent value in the premium SUV market. That is, if you can keep it close to the $55,000 base price. This thing can get out of hand if you start optioning every little thing, and you can actually get this over $90,000 with basically all the options. So keep the option sheet light, and I think you'll be happy as long as you're into an SUV that is relatively understated and is not necessarily inspiring to drive, but is super comfortable and feels very premium. I think you're just going to be happy if those criteria are exactly what you're looking for. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've made it this far, consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you want to follow me in between episodes, see what I'm up to, Eat, Sleep, Drive TV on Instagram. See you guys.